Hey everyone, hello and welcome. So glad you made it. It is Madeline here, and today we are having part two of the communication breakdown, right? I have some corporate friends on the line. They're still joining. I see that I have some people live with me on Facebook. If you're there on Facebook, say hello because I can't see you unless you say hello. Hey Dawn, I'm so glad. Oh, so nice to see you. I haven't seen you in ages. So today we're talking about, it's actually part two of the communication breakdown, right? Because last week we talked about how this is a big cause of stress, right? That, hey Dawn, that this is a big cause of stress, angst, hurt, aggravation, right? Because people don't understand what we're saying. We don't understand what others are saying. I started last week with, I know that you've said at one point or another, or at a minimum, someone has said to you, most likely both, that that's not what I meant, right? That's not what I said. That's not what you said. And all those are true. And if you weren't here last week, I am going to give you a real quick high-level summary of what we talked about last week, but there's a write-up on Facebook and there is a video on Facebook. So go listen to part one. Yeah, Dawn, go listen to part one, and it'll give you a lot of background on what we're talking about today. And today we're talking about part two, right? We're going to pick up where we left off last week. But here's that high-level summary. Again, many of us, one of our biggest stressors is communication breakdown in our relationships, right? And feelings get hurt, and people become estranged because communication was misunderstood, mistaken, or maybe you just said it wrong or said something that you wish you hadn't said. And hopefully this talk today will help you be able to do that better going forward, right? And that you can repair any miscommunications that you've had in the past and avoid them in the future, right? So, and aside from hurt feelings, this can happen with our loved ones, our friends, and at work, right? That causes a whole other host of problems, right? Whether you don't want confusion in the workplace, right? That can lead to performance issues, HR issues, and whatever side of those issues that you're on, no one wants to be in that situation, right? So it's important that we learn how to communicate effectively so we can avoid all those negative situations, right? And communicate effectively and get our message across properly and effectively get what we want, right? So last week we talked about how perception is reality, right? And that the human mind can only take in, the human mind our being is taking in 2 million bits of information per second, right? Wow, that's a lot of information. However, our being can't process that much information. We can only process about 126 bits per second, right? So last week we talked about how we delete, distort, and generalize, right? And I even gave you some examples about how we do that, right? The rose bush that we drive by regularly on our way to the grocery store, but we don't see it until our partner points it out to us, right? Deletion. Distortion. I gave you the example of my visit to the doctor with my mom, right? And how he made a comment about her age, and we both took it into completely different manners, right? And he probably actually meant it in a third way altogether. And then there's generalization, right? So I didn't really talk about generalization, but that's kind of woven in and out and in between all of these. And generalization is, so my mom is having work done on her house. And of course we need to acquire, interview contractors and get estimates for the work. And she always asks me to look things over and help her with that sort of thing, which I'm happy to do. And so we were looking at the estimates and commenting on how, this is more than I expected. It's always more than you expected, right? This is more than we expected. We think it's a little high. And poor mom's going to take another one for the team. She made a general derogatory comment about contractors. And I had to say, and it's funny because we're talking about this week, and I had to say, really, Mom, you know all contractors, you dealt with all contractors? And she, quickly corrected herself and said, no, I don't know all contractors, but I've heard about some contractors. And that's leading me into today's topic, right? Is that everyone, right? We are all at any given point in time deleting, distorting, and generalizing in order to make sense of that 2 million bits of information that we are taking in, so we can narrow it down into the 126 bits per second that we can manage, right? And that we can absorb. And then that is our perception, right? And how is that and my perception is different from your perception, right? It's different from his perception, it's different from her perception. And how can that be, right? I also talked about, the two people who went out to dinner at the same restaurant, ordered the same food, same server, same ambiance, have completely different experiences, right? One loves it, one hated it. How is that, right? It's the information that we're gathering. It's the manner in which we are processing the information. Again, perception is reality, and my perception is different from your perception. So if you could keep that in mind, right? Keep that in your awareness, that will help you better communicate with whomever it is that you need to communicate. Coworker, spouse, friend, person at the airport or at the checkout counter at the grocery store, whoever it is. And the way that we process the information is really based on our values, right? And our values are what's important to us. Our values determine how we spend our time, our money, and our attention, right? So it's important to everyone here today to expand your knowledge, expand your awareness, and work towards becoming just a better person and enjoying life more, because that's why you're spending your time with me. Thank you for spending your time with me, to learn these lessons and then go forth and apply them in your life, right? So values, someone's values determine how they delete, distract, and distort, right? That's one way that people process the 2 million bits of information that they're taking in every second. The other way is, right, through their experiences, right? So all of our experiences are differently. How we got to where we are right now, right, is built up of experiences, and we look at them and process them based on our values, right? So my experiences have been different from your experiences, and that can be true even if people have the same values, right? So their experiences color the lenses in which they see things through, right? So for example, back to the contractor with my mom, she had negative experiences with contractors, and or had friends or family who have told her stories about negative experiences with contractors that led her to make this generalization about contractors now, which she has quickly overcome. So when you're talking to someone else, when you're communicating with someone else, because it's not always talking, right? Could be via email or text or so many different means of communication these days. Keep that in mind, that they may not be hearing, they're probably not hearing what you're saying. They are processing the information based on their values and their experiences. So for at work, for example, I know I have some corporate people on the line with me, and I know that there are some finance people and some IT folks on the line. So if you're communicating at work, so you finance and IT people perhaps are pretty detail oriented, or should be pretty detail oriented. If you're communicating, so that's important to you, right? That's important to you in your work, in your day-to-day activity. So if you're communicating with someone who is not detail-oriented, they may not be hearing the message that you were trying to communicate to them. So what do, right? So last week I shared some steps with you. Again, go back to last week's video or email or Facebook post, whatever the case may be, and look at those steps. But actually before that, what do you do? And I just got to tell you, one of those steps is assume that they don't know what you're talking about, right? Assume that your message was not received as you communicated it, and ask questions, okay? Ask questions to make sure that it was received as you desired. And then this overall premise is even more important than that, or perhaps the prelude to that. And that is that, and this is one of the 14 laws of effectiveness, right? Also known as the presuppositions of NLP, but I like the 14 laws of effectiveness. So, and this is number, well, it doesn't matter what number it is because they're all equally important, is that the meaning of the communication is the response that you get. I'll let you sit with that for a moment. Let me repeat that. The meaning of the communication is the response that you get. And what that means is that you are responsible, the communicator is responsible for the message that is received by the receiver of the communication, right? So one of my Facebook friends said in the invitation that I sent out, well, you know, Madeline, I'm sure one of the problems is also that, you know, when you're talking to someone, they are already working out in their mind their response to you, or what they think it is that you are going to say. We all know someone like that, right? We've probably done that ourselves. I know I've done that myself, so we're probably all guilty of that. And again, not placing judgment or blame, just bringing it into our awareness, right? So oftentimes we can be, or whoever we're talking to is already thinking about their response, right? Or has already presupposed what it is you're going to say and is not listening to what you're going to say. None of that matters with this law of effectiveness, right? The law of effectiveness says that the communication, the meaning of the communication is the response you get. So if whoever you're communicating with didn't get your message, it is your responsibility to ensure that your message is received, right? So what does that mean? That means you need to consider the other person, right? So how can you communicate differently so the other person receives your message? Again, think about them. What are their values, perhaps? What are their experiences, perhaps? And you may or may not be in a position to know those things, but let's go to the workplace, for example. So for example, if you are a finance person or an IT person and you are highly detail oriented and you're working with someone in PR, for example, probably not as detail oriented and more global. And as far as I know, I could be mistaken. Feel free to let me know if I am, my PR friends. But you need to understand that they may not, that based on their values and their experiences, they may not have the level of understanding of the importance of details as you do. So it is up to you. It is your responsibility, for example, to impress upon them the importance of those details, for an example. So again, it is, and this leads to another law of effectiveness, which I think we're going to cover all of them at some point, because they help us be effective, right? They help us be effective and therefore successful, and they are the underlying principles of effective communication. So we will talk about all 14 at some point, so stay tuned for that. But the meaning of the communication is the response you get also goes hand in hand with having respect for the other person's model of the world. So not only having respect for it, but being aware of it, right? So being, at this point, let's just say being aware of the other person's model of the world, and to the extent that it may be different from yours, it is probably different from yours, right? That's right. And so, and as a result, then it comes back to us. How can I communicate differently in order to meet this person where this person or these people where they are, so I am assured that my message is heard, because it's my responsibility to effectively communicate my message. It's your responsibility to effectively communicate your message. And that is another of the laws of effectiveness, which is being at cause, which is being responsible for everything and anything that goes on in your world. And we may start with that next week or not. I'm not sure. I have a couple of ideas for next week, and I'm always open to whatever you have to say as well, whatever whatever you want to hear about next week. So if I get a burning desire for something else, we may talk about something else next week. So I'm going to unmute my friends on the line, see if they have thoughts or comments. If I see that there are some people live with me on Facebook, so if you have any thoughts or comments, please put them in the chat, because I can't see who you are unless you say hello. I'm unmuting. Okay, everyone's unmuted. Thoughts, comments, corporate friends?
Well, it's also important to be a good listener, right? Even though all the ownership is on the speaker.
Yes. Correct. Yes. So Johanna is saying that it's important to be a good listener, because that's the other side of communication, right? Communication. And so Johanna makes a good point. Communication is a two-way street, right? There is listening and there is communicating. So to my friend on Facebook's point, it is important that you listen, that instead of formulating your own message as they go along, because how many of us, I know that you've been guilty of that, right? That you're formulating your own response before the person who's speaking has finished, right? If you've gone off daydreaming, or you're formulating your response, or I have a very close family member who is formulating my response before I'm done, saying it. So then when I'm finished speaking, they speak accordingly to what they thought I said, and then there's confusion, right? And maybe I've done this as well, and then I have a particular family member who's guilty of this. And then there's confusion because they thought I was going in another direction. So yes, critical point is being a good listener, right? Is listening, waiting your turn to speak. And that doesn't mean just being quiet. That means actively listening to what the other person that you're communicating with is saying. So that's a beautiful point, Johanna. Thank you for bringing that up. And that also speaks to Chris's point on Facebook, who also made that point. But I want you to be wary of active listener, right? So I'm asking you to be an active listener. I'm asking the person in the communication to be, or reminding you to be, the active listener. That when you are the communicator, when you are the one who is speaking or writing, that you don't use that to deflect blame for your message not being received as you intended. Well, you didn't read my email closely enough, or you weren't listening to what I had to say. That may be true. But that detracts from the principle of the meaning of the communication is the response that you get, and that essentially whoever is delivering the message is responsible for making sure that the message is properly received. So if someone wasn't listening, then it behooves the speaker to approach that individual or that group, perhaps, right? Because we could be speaking to groups, in another way to ensure that their message is received as it was intended, right? Because the principle always comes back to our being at cause, which maybe we'll talk about next week. Anyone else? No one's chatting on Facebook. Anyone else on the line? Any further thoughts, responses, rebuttals? All right, let's meditate, my lovelies. I'm going to mute you all again. Let's get comfortable. As we prepare for meditation. That means your spine is straight. You're sitting up if you can, feet flat on the earth, or a pillow, or a block if you can't reach. Or maybe you're sitting with your legs crossed yogi style. That's how I like to sit. I know that's how Johanna likes to sit. I hope she doesn't mind my sharing her secret. But you want to be comfortable, okay? Let all that go. Let everything we just talked about go. That was a lot. And it'll marinate in the field of infinite possibilities, which we are about to enter. Take a couple of deep breaths in through the nose, out through an open mouth. 2 more. In through the nose, out through an open mouth. Last time, in through the nose, out through an open mouth, constricting the back of the throat. Mouth closed, breathing through our nostrils if you can. Eyes closed. Now let's begin the silent repetition of the mantra. So, hum. So, hum. Think so on the inhalation and hum on the exhalation, or not. However you like best. So, hum. Repetition of the mantra is gentle and relaxed. There's no need to force or concentrate. We just think it easily and effortlessly. And when our mind drifts away, and it will, because that's what the mind does, we just notice and then gently return to so, hum. Now let's continue meditating gently. I'll watch the time and let you know when to stop. Enjoy. Continuing with your eyes closed. Stop thinking the mantra. And just sit easily. And when you're ready, when it's comfortable, slowly open your eyes. Was the meditation comfortable? Awesome. So anyone else join? Anyone else with you, Johanna?
Oh, yeah. Lisa and Pat.
Lisa.
Here.
Oh, hey, yay, hey, thank you.
Yay.
So Johanna, thank you for your regular engagement. I really appreciate it. And you always make important, beautiful points. So I'm glad that you're here every week or most weeks. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for joining me on Facebook. And I'll look forward to seeing you all again soon. And until then, I'll see you in the gap, right? Namaste. Be blessed.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.